everyone. Welcome back. We're back with another exciting panel. I happen to know this one's going to be saucy because we started off right before the camera started, and I know what we're in for. How about we start off by introducing ourselves? Go ahead.
Yep. I'm Lasse. I run Solita's Gen AI studio, so I work with enabling our organization for everything that happens with Gen AI.
Excellent.
So I'm Rickard Elbrandt. I'm based here in Stockholm and covering the Nordics from a sales perspective at Collibra.
Collibra,
Yep.
Cool.
Nice to meet everyone. My name is Rajagopal. I'm the chief architect, part of our CTO organization at Informatica. Work mainly with our strategic customers across the EMEA LATAM organization based in the Netherlands.
Excellent. All right. So let's see if we can catalyze this. Just getting started a little bit soft, and then we can get into the more exciting stuff. This panel is about harnessing the power of generative AI, overcoming core challenges, enterprise values. We were prompted with a couple of questions here, but I want to hear sort of what's top of mind for you when it comes to making use of generative AI. Perhaps, is it any different from advanced analytics or any other sort of computer science in general? What do you say?
There's a lot of similarities. It's a change. It's an organizational change. All of that is the same. Like these things have applied for a long time. What is different is the pace. It's a lot faster. You can do things in days and in weeks when previously it was weeks and months. So that's the change. I think what's happening now is we saw last year was companies doing POCs. Now they're looking at doing things bigger and running into the usual challenges of how do we actually scale this. Because nobody has done that. So that's, I think, what I see happening in the market.
What kind of challenges do you see?
No, I echo that. I think also what's interesting now is, of course, the pace and the scalability of this, and also taking into consideration that spread inside the organization, and also how you are taking care of some of the risk also, because I think that is an increased risk in terms of how you are going to govern and treat these models, and how you're going to make sure that security and compliance is spread within the organization. So
risk because these things are more customer facing, or because they're more prone to breaking, or like why is it more risky?
I think it's risk because of understanding the models and the implications of that, what it has, making sure that you are feeding the models with the correct data, trusted data, and making sure that the impact that you have, of course, will impact the output, and making sure that the feeding these models, the AI business cases with actionable, trusted data, making sure that the output is correct as well.
Okay. Well, what do you say?
I think excellent points made already. So scale and risk are definitely two factors, but also I see the more and more need to focus on the foundation. So this is linked to quality, right? Because having the right data foundation, I think, is making it even more essential, especially for the scale aspect, because without the right foundation, you're making wrong quality decisions at scale. So it's much more faster decisions, but it's much more incorrect decisions, and the impact that has on the organization.
What does that mean? When you say foundation, like what kind of things are you thinking about?
I think, in my opinion, a core foundation is what I call, and what Informatica calls, a system of metadata record. Meaning that there's a lot of data out there already, so that there's not the lack of data in terms of data created, but there's a lack of connecting what is actually out there with what can be used for AI in an intelligent fashion. And that's the metadata, kind of the brain in between the data and the AI.
Okay, so there's a lack of infrastructure. Would that be a right way of characterizing it?
Infrastructure is probably not...
Supporting infrastructure.
Right.
It could be semantic support, but I mean...
indeed.
You know, okay, and that's the foundation.
Yes.
I'd like to... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, what has changed is we were struggling with data governance of structured data, like ERP, CRM.
Right.
Well, you know everything about data governance. Now we have to govern the unstructured data, all the documents and all of that stuff, and we were not ready with the structured data, so we're even less ready with the unstructured data. So that's definitely what's changing.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge risk, of course, for the compliance, the ethics, and the security. I mean, and you can just imagine all of the reputational damage that this can impact if you are having AI models and AI businesses running wild inside the organization. And we've already seen some of the examples. You can laugh about it having colored Viking, for instance, and some of the images that you've seen. But that's kind of more from a personal. But imagine what is happening on some of the company and the scale of that, and also the damage that can have on some of the branding. So if you don't have that data in order, and that comes with both structured but also unstructured data, then I think that's where we at Collibra believe that AI starts with trusted data. You need to make sure that the data that you feed into these models is of good quality.
At a fundamental level, I think with my conversations with CDO, they are also revisiting the data strategy as a result of this. Because I think a lot of, I mean, it's not that you need to break your existing data strategy, but to your point, looking at unstructured data, looking at enabling much more a wider community is becoming more and more important. So that I think the CDO's role is becoming even more critical due to Gen AI.
I think conceptually, the type of data modeling and understanding that needs to be done is on a higher ordinal. It's semantic. It's like understanding structured data really means you have to understand a problem domain in its entirety. Whereas with structured data, usually you could, fall back onto simple statistical descriptors, averages, trends, and that kind of stuff. Now you really have to understand the meaning of what you're doing, what you're collecting, and all that kind of stuff. And one thing I want to ask you is, people have been talking about deep learning and now language models and everything else as being impenetrable, impossible to understand, and we don't know what's going on, and they're black boxes and whatnot, and that's the blocking factor. Is that a sentiment? Do you agree with that, or?
I definitely agree, at least partially. It is a black box, and we're placing it. It's an external black box that we're placing in our internal workflow. So that's part of the risk.
When you say black, what do you mean exactly? What is it that's not?
Without going all legal, but the transparency and the explainability of the model, it's difficult to explain them because they are external models that we can't fully decipher. And they're like living, breathing organisms now because they don't reproduce the same output. So, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a different thing. And we have to be able to work with that, and we have to learn how they actually work. So it's going to be a couple of years until we get used to how they actually behave.
I feel like humans are very much like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Black boxes. But I feel one of the reasons we're using these models nowadays is because they can solve problems that we are not good at defining ourselves. For example, they can turn unstructured data into structured data and that kind of thing. And the problem domain is hard to describe. Not necessarily the model itself. We can pick apart the models and stuff, but we might not even be able to pick apart the problem. I'm wondering when you guys come across the challenges, are they more of technical nature, or are they more of conceptualizing the problem nature?
That's a great point. I think the first issue is indeed to ensure that the organizations move beyond the hype phase to kind of doing only cool demos to really associating business value where it actually makes sense. And here you could, from my discussions with executives, they see at least three kind of patterns here. The base one, which is almost becoming table stakes, is productivity, right? So we have so many co-pilots now from all of us, which is helping to scale the productivity of each and every one. Really useful, but I think in over time that's going to be table stakes. The next level is really when you integrate it with your business processes. How can you accelerate your business processes? How can you transform your business process? How can you measure that business process's outcome and effectivity? So that's kind of going to be the next stage. And I think the ultimate nirvana is when CXOs can use it for their board strategy itself. So when they know how they can really use to make data-driven decisions to complement, rather than only what probably they still do is make gut-based decisions and try to find data and AI to back that rather than the other way around.
I want to get back to you and ask you guys also about these soft challenges, because you gave some good examples of technical challenges, but I also want to hear about soft challenges. And I want you to answer a question that I'm going to bounce off what you just said. Stop doing the playground stuff and start doing useful stuff. Are those little POCs and experiments, are they useless, or is there a place for that, a use for that?
There's always use. You learn. That's how you experiment and you learn, and we encourage companies to do it, but then also encourage companies to then think further. Now that you've learned, what can you do with this?
Move out of the sandbox?
Huh?
Move out of the sandbox and...
Yeah, exactly, and do things that actually create value, because eventually, we're not quite there yet, but eventually leadership will start asking for results. It's bound to come at some point. So then you have to show that it's actually creating impact. We're doing internally an experiment where we are using Gen AI for software development in everything we can imagine it doing. So we have an AI product owner, we have AI scenarios, we have AI test users. We're doing everything we possibly can. It's a really interesting results in how it can imagine, like you said, imagine things that we would never think of, and then just the pace. It's so fast. It is.
Give me an example.
Yeah.
So you're replacing lots of traditional software functions. Where are you surprised at how effective it is?
I think the biggest impact right now that we're thinking is just simply the pace. How quickly we can do things, and actually what becomes the bottleneck is the humans, because we're not.
Because they're working at night while we're sleeping.
Yeah, and AI can compute things in seconds, and we humans, we have to get together and meet and talk, and that's slow. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting on that, because there's, like you said, there's a lot of companies that have started this initiative, and they got a bag of money, and sort of this is something that they're using for learning. But I think eventually and soon we'll also come to coming back to what is the business case and how we're going to drive this, because now it's more on the learning, where we will try to get a glimpse on what can be achievable, and trying to get that understanding of models and how we can leverage different AI models in our day-to-day work. But soon there will be question asked, sort of what is the ROI on that, and that's where I believe it's important to document and really get that full life cycle to see sort of what are the investments and what are the outputs on these.
If I can add a couple of examples I am seeing. One is a very public one, so that's Klarna. I think they are using it for their customer support and service, so I think it has helped scale their customer service heavily, and also reduce the amount of volume to respond to a particular query. Right? So that's a very simple use case where Gen AI is able to scale where humans could not probably scale to that level of answering questions from a service perspective. Something very specific to Informatica, what we are seeing our customers use the AI is for things like connecting their business problems to the data that they need. So for example, today, if they had to do that, they have to reach out from a typical data governance to the right people and the processes behind it. But if the AI is helping them to identify the right process and people, that can be a very fast aid. So that's where it's an aid, where human is still in the middle, but AI is really helping them to find the answer fast for their day-to-day jobs.
Right.
These are good examples where we see a lot of value realized already.
I sort of want to push back. Not that those aren't good use cases, but I think a lot of companies get stuck on the use cases that are on improving operational efficiency.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of ones that are tied to their core business. So Klarna is a great example, because they evidently saved a lot of money, but we're not quite there yet. Maybe one day we won't be able to replace everyone, and even then, there's a cap. So what, are your operational costs going to be zero? But there's no cap on how much money you can make by getting more customers, making more valuable products, and that kind of stuff. So why aren't companies tying it to what their actual business is? What's stopping them?
I agree with you. Like, I think all of last year, especially the first half of last year, we talked way too much about productivity, and we were throwing around these percentages of 30–40% productivity, and I don't think that was a healthy conversation. Partially also because it creates for the people that we're replacing, it creates sort of you don't want to hear that message. At least where I look at things now, it is what Gen AI is doing is actually helping us solve problems that previously were too difficult to solve. So it's not about replacing the humans, it is about actually doing things that previously were too difficult, too cumbersome, took too long. And that's a much better story, I think. And I hope we get there. That's from our
also a very good value proposition in general, both internally, but even to a customer. If you have an ability that was never even possible previously, that's a competitive advantage.
Exactly.
Why are they not?
I mean, I believe that many people have looked at the risk and maybe been afraid that they will be replaced. I mean, software developer to some extent, where we will be using AI for writing code and so forth. But I think, to actually leveraging AI to use things that haven't been achievable so far and haven't been imaginable so far. That's where I see the big benefit, of course, into this.
Well, there seem to be a lot of soft blockers. The technical stuff is always fun because it's just an engineering problem, right?
Yeah.
Engineers will figure out a way to make things work. But the soft blockers, how many of you have worked with companies that have ethics committees for AI specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
What is that about? Why is there an AI ethics committee and not an oil and gas ethics committee or a child labor ethics committee or anything else like that? Okay, but we have AI ethics committees, and I'm a nihilist, so I don't even believe that people know what they're talking about when it comes to ethics. But we were talking a little bit about it before. What's your take on it?
I mean, ethics or then sustainability, that's sort of greenwashing. These things still happen way too much. It's sort of an external function that you put in place because you have to. But if ethics isn't part of your normal ways of working, same thing, sustainability from a broad perspective. It's not just the sort of climate aspect, but sustainable means you're legal, you're compliant, you're ethical.
You can do it forever.
And, exactly. And like it makes sense. There's no reason to outsource that to a specific separate function. That should be part of everything you do. And that's why I was challenging the question
Maybe
of
people think that
ethics
engineers
versus
are
business.
less ethical than politicians and business people.
We're all humans, so...
I just think when you hear that said out loud, you realize how absurd it is to say that engineers would be less ethical than those people. Come on.
Yeah, and engineers might get carried away with the possibilities of technology. Business people get carried away with the possibilities of revenue. It's same drivers. But when we get together, and if we have cross-functional teams that sort of challenge each other, that's a way of making sure that what you do is sustainable broadly. You're creating revenue, and you're doing it in a legal, ethical, sustainable way.
I guess part of the AI, maybe it's because of the black box where people feel that this is not really something that they can control, whereas you have some of we talk about oil and gas, that's more tangible, and maybe people feel that there's a bit more, things that you can touch on, whereas this black box, we're really not sure how we can treat it. Maybe we gather a committee or council in order to make sure that we keep that safe and sound within the boundaries of the corporate guidelines or corporate guardrails that we have. So I think that's part of it. But I believe that that's important because I think the whole thing and the people, you need to collaborate around it. It's not only the engineers that can run wild with the AI models. You need to put some guardrails around this and make sure that this is governed correctly and making sure that you have the guardrails.
What kind of guardrails? Like what kind of things do you want to protect?
I mean, like making sure that we talked about some of the risk, the reputational damage, some of the AI model could go in a certain direction, which could incorporate with some of the other things that you're driving in your business. So making sure that that's handled correctly, making sure that you have the legal team looking into the risk and also the security part, making sure that what kind of data are we using in terms of, so we're not compromise anything or maybe doing some unethical with this.
In my opinion, I think I've seen different kinds of AI council. There are ones which, to your point, are trying to become the evangelist, which is probably not the right way of doing it, because then you're kind of trying to push very much like a sustainability angle as well, trying to push it from a very siloed part of the organization to everyone else. Whereas there are other AI ethics council who are more helpers or helping them show the route, or a service provider almost for those who don't know in the organization what they can use or which is ethical versus not. Right? So it can be more like a soundboard than a committee trying to guard or push, in my opinion. So that it could be used in either way, but in the end, I think to the point, ethics should not be limited to that council, but coming from both top-down and bottom-up perspective.
But what ethics are we talking about here? It makes it sound like we're controlling this entity that is either conscious or inherently has the ability to do things that are so unethical that we don't have ethics councils for giving loans in banks. I mean, we do it from a risk perspective, right? We don't want to lose money, but not because it's bad to give loans to somebody that's going to misuse it. We don't have ethics people working at food companies. We don't have child labor. I mean, none of that stuff's important, but AI is. This is a PR stunt.
I agree with your sort of assessment, but the thing that is different, AI is so new that I think for this transition period, maybe it's, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 years, we're going to need these special... I don't like the word council.
Let me ask, how does one become an ethics expert?
I believe that it is. So we actually have AI ethics. There's a you can even actually educate yourself to AI ethics. But I believe it's a cross-functional thing. So you bring together people who represent different interests, and that in itself creates. You challenge each other in a constructive way, and that makes sure that what you do is ethical, sustainable.
Ideally,
but I think it's a transition period. Sorry.
But
So just like we won't need data strategies, I think 5 years from now, but now we do because it's a transition. We need AI governance now, but 5 years from now, it should be just business as usual, or 10 years, I don't know. But it's...
Yeah.
ideally, in the future, AI agents are also part of this AI Ethics Council, and it's not just humans who are part of the Ethics Council. That would be interesting.
Oh, scary thought.
I think humans are not the epitome of ethics as a species, generally speaking. I mean, I don't know. All the AI ethics people that I've seen graduated from University of YouTube. The people that typically work with ethics come from university, and this is not the kind of stuff they talk about. Exactly,
but I don't think that there is one specific person that sort of run the ethics.
There's a whole stage there with people there whose title is AI ethics expert, working at government institutions and everything else. And they stand there and they say, you're not allowed to deploy AI because it might be biased. And we're like, as engineers, a model, a second-degree equation is biased.
Yeah, but I think.
What are you talking about?
Well, maybe that it isn't that specific person that have kind of the vote of cancelling the whole project. They might be one vote within the council, and then you have different inputs from other teams as well. And I think the joint collaboration around the different personas within your organization that builds up the council. So I wouldn't say that ethics person have the majority vote.
No, of course. But I mean, also imagine you're a fashion retailer and you're making marketing and you're only picking super slim people and you have an ethical responsibility to try and make people feel included. But we don't say that there's an ethics committee to decide whether or not it's ethical to do that kind of thing. It's very odd to have an ethics discussion around AI and make it particular.
But maybe those business ethical questions, they've been around for a much longer time, so people are used to dealing with them. Whereas AI is still, people are still getting to grips with how it actually works. So AI literacy helps a lot, developing that competency broadly in the organization. But I mean, I agree.
Right.
Also, I think if you have AI ethics people in your organization, a much better way to think about is a facilitating role as opposed to somebody who has a veto.
I suppose one thing I could agree with you then, if we sort of pivot and then use it as a segue. Probably those of us that live in the AI bubble are very aware of the failure modes of AI systems. Yeah. So for example, you could say that what do you call it? A thing that you wash your hands in that uses light to detect your hand is racist because it only is affected by light skin or something like that. But people are sort of aware of those failure modes and they avoid them for the most part. And I think that we're aware of most of the failure modes of AI, and so it's not as much of an ethical decision. But if we view it the way you're saying now, there is an AI literacy phase that we have to go through before people learn sort of what's reasonable to expect. But also, and I guess I can ask you this, it's going to be difficult to offset given the rapid pace of change, right? The failure modes that exist now are not going to be the same failure modes that exist in 6 months. So what lies at the frontier of generative AI right now, harnessing the power, overcoming core challenges? What do you think are going to be the challenges in 6 months?
Oh, I don't have a crystal ball, but at least what we're doing is we're continuously experimenting. We're doing our own practical research, R&D, and so on, just trying to keep up with the pace of innovation.
Well, okay, things that are a challenge today that you think will be much easier in 6 months.
I think accessibility is still going to improve. So yeah, we have web-based, nice user interface, but I think access to various models is going to, I hope it's going to improve for non-developers. That's at least one thing. And then I'm hoping that we'll find more specialized models that don't consume so much compute, and we don't have to run large models for everything. Instead, we find more economic models.
There's a lot of science showing that small models can be tremendously capable. Have you seen Microsoft Phi 3 that came out, the small one? It's 3 billion parameters, and it looks really, really good.
Yeah, and we do stuff on our mobile phones now with So that's what I'm hoping for.
What do you say? I feel like it's easier to predict 5 years forward than the 6 months forward right now.
No, we talked about that previous. I think the economics going 6 months further will of course be there will be more scrutiny on making sure that you actually are working on the models that gives you the ROI and the effectiveness. I think that's will probably be something going harder and harder. We're leaving the proof of concept and now moving into production, and I think that's where the emphasis will lie.
Well, let me ask one question, because I think when it came to advanced analytics, there was a lot of carryover, right? So one company would do a demand forecast, and then another company's like, cool, I can do a demand forecast. But I'm wondering, do you think that these Gen AI applications are so, because of the types of problems they're solving, that they're very specific to your company, and so it's not going to be as easy to be inspired and just rip other people's ideas and use them in the exact same way?
I don't have any...
I mean, we're thinking at this conference, for example. Have you heard lots of examples where you're like, sweet, I can use that one, I can use that one, you know, the things Ericsson is talking about?
I mean, I think there's some universal things, like customer service. Yes, it varies by business and domain, but still there's a lot of universal truths about customer service, and that's what we're seeing a lot of the Gen AI applications now. So I think, and finance...
Just because that's the easiest one to...
It is, yeah,
straight in.
exactly, yeah. Finance is tricky because in finance, you have to be correct.
Yeah.
And Gen AI models were not designed to be correct. But yeah, I think there's a lot of universal things that will apply across, at least across companies, maybe even across industries. But then there's some specific things that, you have to be more custom. And then we have things like actual language and, finding the right models for your own language. I think that's going to evolve. But it's quite expensive to develop those models, so we'll see what happens there.
What do you think for the coming 6 months?
So I think the importance of data is going to become more and more. There's going to be more and more power to the points made before, but that's going to make finding the right data and the metadata behind more and more important. Another part I feel is important is also to ensure that more and more literacy happens, because I think it's going to be more and more accessible, which is going to make it more difficult to make sure everyone understands how to use it. And another interesting part, would love to hear all of your thoughts on this, because I'm sure you know more than me on this, but I think another important part is how to personalize these kind of large or small language models to the consumer on front of it, right? So how do you make that happen is also going to be more and more an interesting challenge to solve in the coming time.
Well, let me ask you, I do think that upskilling and literacy is something that's been mentioned in many of these panels. And I think when it's sort of left not explicit, people think, okay, well, they need to know some of the failure modes, they need to know a little bit of this and that. When you think about it, do you think about a certain type of upskilling for business people and a certain type for tech people? Or like, what do you have in mind specifically? What would organizations benefit the most from in terms of upskilling?
So I think there needs to be a base upskill for everyone in the organization.
Right.
Not just on AI. I still think it needs to be on data as well, because they could know how AI is used, but they could be using the wrong data behind that AI to be making these decisions. So there needs to be a base AI and data training for everyone in the enterprise. And then it depends on domains, roles, etc., to be more tailored. But that linking to the ethics discussion, having that base, I think will help avoid this kind of confusion around who's doing ethics, etc. in the organization.
I mean, one example I think is interesting, and we talked about sort of how you scale this and the simplistic of getting that adoption across the business. I mean, my father, 78-year-old, he had nothing bothers about this, but then he started to get ChatGPT, and then starting to, and it's the user interface is so simple, and he can just easily query all kinds of stuff. And I think that's kind of example, because he's not very tech savvy and at all, and not really interested in data, but suddenly he started to exploring these capabilities. And why? Because it's so simple. And I think that kind of proves sort of if you find some sort of a simple user interface, simplistic use case, then of course the scale and the adoption comes quite naturally.
Right.
I think that's it's an interesting story, because then all of that leads to then the follow-up questions. Okay, so does your father actually understand that when ChatGPT returns something, that it's not actually a fact machine, it is, or it might be, depending on how he's actually prompted it, but it's actually inventing things because it was designed to create new stuff. That's like the next level. And
no, exactly.
And we're still I think people are still getting to sort of, still struggling to understand whether it created something new or did it return a fact.
Was a Google search, or was it really something?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's.
Yeah. But we'll get there, but it'll be a couple of years, I think.
Okay, so let's follow up on the question you just asked. I've been saying, and you hinted at, that it's difficult to train these models. And I have a feeling that we're going to have these mega large foundation models that nobody trains, especially not from scratch.
Yep.
And even the fine tunes that I've seen from organizations here in Sweden. I remember last year, as soon as like Llama 1 came out and some others, people started releasing fine tunes, and they were just garbage, honestly. They're like, oh, we have our own model. Nice. How is that going to continue on in the future? Is training still a thing?
I was speaking with somebody yesterday about this too, and I think especially in Northern Europe, because we don't have those massive large organizations or too many of them. Last year was all RAG, so it was just let's not even fine tune. Let's just make sure that we limit the model to use our own fact-based information. It's a little hard for me, at least, to predict now. Is this going to be a year of more fine tuning? Because I think RAG is still the preferred mode for enterprise.
They solve sort of different problems.
They do, yeah.
I don't know if they're mutually exclusive. It's been very difficult to fine-tune reliably.
And it's expensive too.
Yes. But the small models, like Phi, you can fine-tune on your 4090 at home, which is cool. Like the 3 billion parameter one, I tuned it on my chat logs, so now I don't have to answer my friends when they write to me on Telegram. If the model just answers for me. Very, very believable.
Very scary too.
That's awesome.
They believe it's you, or
yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, they predicted this on Silicon Valley on the TV show, you know? It was a joke, but now it's real.
Yeah.
Okay, so fine tunes and expensive stuff. Do you think that there is an engineering competence shortage?
I would say not just engineering, but also psychology in this case, because I think a lot of this is linked to how you are training or fine-tuning or ragging your model. Of course, requires engineers, but also requires the right psychology.
What kind? Like an entrepreneurial mindset, or like
Depends on the
ethical mindset?
Could be all of this. Depends on what the output you're expecting. Like if you have multiple small language models in your enterprise, depends now who's the end customer of this. Is it someone internal to the organization, like the employees who are going to use this? Is it an end customer? What are they going to use it for? What kind of situations they might put the prompt under? I think all that requires some kind of a psychology, as well as different kind of thinking than a traditional engineer, because we as engineers, of course, have very good capabilities to build this, but we might not have all the scenarios in mind how to test these out. So.
And it's funny how in our excitement with all of this happening, we forget some of those basic principles. Let's design with users in mind.
Exactly.
We've done software products forever, and we know how to design those. Why do we forget when it comes to AI that it's the same principles apply? So yeah, we, at least Solita, we like to always combine a team of, you have designers who think of the user and the business context and everything else, and then you have your engineers and work iteratively.
That's a great point. You know, for product development, you have the engineering, the product owner, and the design team.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen so many designers or design teams when it comes to AI,
exactly.
even though they're products, like you just said.
Yeah.
And one last context here. I've always felt that the developer experience is very important for being productive, meaning you have to design a set of tools, a workflow, and other stuff that lends itself well to the way they want to work.
Yeah.
I wonder if design is going to become a bigger part of AI products, AI development, and everything else.
I believe it will, and also then because for design, you now also have new tools. So how you do the design is also changing. So there's like all these meta levels of what is changing. So you can create your users virtually, and you can iterate in minutes as opposed to weeks previously. So I really hope design is not ignored in this whole AI frenzy. It's so essential.
I think your example here of ChatGPT, I mean, it succeeded because of its design, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
And it's not only the design of the answer, but design of the questions may be behind that answer. So for example, in the case you mentioned, if your father asked a question where ChatGPT feels it might give not a good answer, it should ask follow-up questions back to your father. That's where I think the design is important, not just to give the answer based on the language model, but how to get to the right answer, hopefully, eventually.
When I show ChatGPT to friends, they're always surprised that it gives such good answers for me and not for them. But that's because my custom prompt is quite good.
Yeah.
And I've told it I don't want it to do this and I want it to do this. I get the sense that getting a feeling for the personality of these bots is also going to be a thing. I guess that's another facet of design.
It is, and I was observing your presentation yesterday. You were sort of quite direct with your GPT, and I was like, oh wow, you're not even trying to be polite. But we're still, as humans, we're still getting to terms with how to interact with these bots because they're kind of human, but they're not. Same thing if we look at robots, and you have those delivery robots, they're small and cute. Why were they designed in that way? Because why should we feel empathy towards a robot?
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt to be kind, right? I mean, you can still treat. You don't need to be an asshole just because there's a machine.
I definitely think empathy is super, super important to machines, to rocks, to animals, to people. And really, what empathy is just trying to do theory of mind. Me trying to understand what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that's a useful skill. But when it comes to I don't know if you're aware of this. You know, if you give a code bounty to the model, it will give you better answers. So if you say, I want you to write me a Python function, here's $200 if you do a good job, it'll generate better code. And the reason is that code bounties are usually collected by people that are a bit more senior and write better code on the internet. So if you force the model to think in those areas of its brain where it was trained on that kind of code, it will also produce better code. So one, being polite, giving a code bounty, it's going to collect after a couple of years, by the way, if you give it, right? But it is funny to experiment with the models and sort of the personalities.
Yeah.
But here's a question. Last question. This one's controversial. Is it wrong to anthropomorphize the models? So, you know, you have Karpathy, Sutskever, Hinton, you know, just some random scientists and myself that suggest that these psychology terms that we use for people are pretty convenient to use for models as well. It's stressed, it's happy, it's this and that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's good or bad?
One of the things I've really sort of kind of suffered a little bit last year is the language we use with AI, because we've chosen to use terms that are human-like. Even the word artificial intelligence is a dangerous. I don't know why that was chosen. But, so language and terminology around AI is really, really difficult. We try to make them human. We talk of agents, but they're not human agents. They're computers, and so that's another area that is evolving. But that's part of when we do AI literacy.
Is it problematic?
It is, I think, because our brains, they haven't developed to fully understand how to interact with machines.
Okay.
So that's at least I want people to just be aware and recognize it.
Is it
I don't know what to do with it.
If a person is too mean to a model?
Could be.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I think I would say, I mean, always be kind. I mean, I think so. That it doesn't hurt you, and I think even like we said, even if it's a machine, I mean, I think you should still treat it as you would treat any other human, and I think in the longer run, it'll always be good to be kind.
It's so weird that is a controversial take. It bothers me because it shouldn't be controversial.
Oh.
It should be okay to smile, be nice to things, take care of them. But it seems like it is pretty controversial. What do you think?
No, I fully agree, but I also see the risks here, because if you've seen the social media now, people are much more different sometimes in social media and the way they are behaving even to humans in social media versus in real life.
Yeah.
So I can easily see this risk extending to AI or AI agents. So the concern is valid, but I fully agree that. But that's where, again, I feel design is important. How the AI responds to this is going to very much make sure that you avoid this happening at scale versus. That's where it comes back to how AI agents or AI models responds to such corner case situations.
Yeah. We are in the age of sci-fi and talking about stuff that's happening now. We're not even talking about the future, and I think this is pretty cool and inspiring.
Absolutely.
Very soon.
Yeah.
This has been a good panel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
and
you.
thanks,
Thank you.
everybody, for joining. We're going to have a little product review right after this. Don't go grab some popcorn, and then we'll be right back. All right. See you soon. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
Thanks.